Hello, beautiful Libra. On August 16, 2026, you may find yourself looking at certain parts of your life a little differently. Not because everything has suddenly changed, but because you are beginning to notice what has been quietly out of balance. You have a natural ability to see several sides of a situation, to understand where another person is coming from, and to search for the response that keeps things peaceful. But there comes a moment when considering everyone else's perspective can make it difficult to hear the voice inside you, asking what you actually want. This is where your attention is being drawn now, not toward creating a perfect balance around you, but toward discovering whether you feel balanced within yourself. You may be carrying several responsibilities at once, moving between work, personal commitments, friendships, family concerns, and the expectations of people who rely on you. Yet genuine harmony does not require you to keep every person satisfied or every situation perfectly smooth. Sometimes harmony begins when you stop forcing yourself to remain in the middle of something that has been quietly asking you to choose. There is also an invitation here to become more open to experiences that loosen your usual patterns. You do not have to abandon your sense of discernment or rush into unfamiliar territory simply for the sake of change. Instead, let curiosity show you where your life has become too carefully arranged, and notice what happens when you allow yourself to respond from something deeper than the need to make the right impression. A different conversation, a new environment, or even a small decision you have been postponing could reveal something about yourself that you have not been giving enough room to express. Your relationships deserve particular attention because this is where the question of balance may become most visible. Pay attention to reciprocity, not only to affection or loyalty, because a relationship can contain genuine care and still become uneven when one person is constantly adjusting while the other simply receives. If a conversation becomes tense, resist the urge to smooth everything over immediately just to restore comfort. Sometimes the discomfort is carrying information, and if you stay present long enough to understand what sits beneath the disagreement, you may discover that the real issue is not conflict itself, but something that has remained unspoken for too long. This can become an important lesson in emotional maturity for you. You do not have to become colder in order to become clearer, and you do not have to abandon kindness in order to establish a boundary. There is a difference between creating peace and avoiding tension, just as there is a difference between compromise and quietly giving away pieces of yourself so that everyone else can remain comfortable. If a relationship is capable of growing with you, honesty can become a doorway into greater understanding rather than a threat to the connection. The same principle begins to touch your practical life. You may be looking more carefully at how you use your money, what you maintain, and which commitments are genuinely worth the energy they require. Rather than thinking only in terms of gaining more, consider what financial choices actually support the life you want to build and the person you are becoming. Stability can come through smaller, deliberate decisions. Knowing what deserves your resources, recognizing where you have been spending to preserve an image or expectation, and choosing what gives you a stronger sense of self-respect. Your professional life can carry a similar message. A new collaboration, responsibility, project, or change in direction may invite you to reconsider how you measure your own value within a larger environment. Your strength is not simply that you know how to work well with other people. It is that you can read the space between people, understand different motivations, negotiate thoughtfully, and recognize where cooperation can create something stronger. But remember that collaboration should strengthen your position, not require you to continually make yourself smaller so someone else can remain comfortable. That distinction may become especially important as you reassess what you want from your work. Recognition matters, but so does the feeling that your contribution has meaning. You may be entering a period in which small signs of progress begin to restore confidence that has been worn down by uncertainty, comparison, or the feeling that your efforts were not fully seen. Let those signs encourage you, but do not make your worth dependent on applause. What matters is learning to recognize your own contribution, even when the room is quiet. Amid all this external movement, make space for yourself. There is a quieter part of this message, asking you to step away from the constant exchange of opinions, expectations, and responsibilities, and listen to what remains when no one else is asking anything from you. A walk outside, a few minutes beside an open window, time near water, or simply sitting somewhere without immediately reaching for another distraction can help you notice what your inner life has been trying to say. You may realize that you have been very good at reading the emotional atmosphere around you while giving far less attention to the atmosphere within yourself. This is also where your sense of self-worth begins to deepen. You do not need another person's approval before your needs become legitimate, and you do not have to justify every choice simply because someone else might misunderstand it. The more honestly you recognize what matters to you, the easier it becomes to make decisions without constantly looking over your shoulder for permission. What begins to change is not necessarily the entire world around you, but your relationship with your own choices, and that can quietly alter everything that follows. The coming shift can therefore feel less like a sudden door flying open and more like a room becoming easier to breathe in. Some pressure may begin to loosen as responsibilities are reorganized, agreements become clearer, or you simply stop carrying tasks that were never entirely yours. Greater order in your work or home life can give you space to return to personal matters that have been waiting for your attention. You may still have difficult things to handle, but when the unnecessary noise is reduced, you can finally distinguish between what truly needs your energy and what has only been consuming it. Emotionally, you may find yourself at an important crossroads. There could be people you genuinely want to remain close to, relationships that deserve more honesty and care, and other situations where continuing to participate in the same pattern only keeps reopening an old wound. Your heart may be generous enough to see the potential in people long after they have shown you that they are not ready to change. You may even know exactly what could help someone you care about. Yet knowing the answer for another person does not give you the power to make them choose it. That realization can be tender, especially when you are accustomed to helping create peace between people. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop trying to carry someone toward a place they have not chosen for themselves. Listen to people whose experience has earned your trust, especially when their perspective helps you separate what you feel responsible for from what actually belongs to you. Their words may not tell you exactly what decision to make, but they can help you see your emotions with enough distance to understand what they are asking from you. And remember, Libra, caring for yourself is not a betrayal of the people you love. You are allowed to consider your own emotional health before reaching the point of exhaustion, resentment, or quiet withdrawal. There is wisdom in asking whether the peace you are protecting is nourishing you or simply postponing a conversation you already know you need to have. As you become more honest about that distinction, a different kind of balance begins to take shape, one that does not depend on everyone standing on equal ground, but on you standing firmly enough within yourself to know where you belong. The Wheel of Fortune can be read here as a symbol of that changing pattern. Rather than promising that circumstances will suddenly turn in your favor, it suggests that an old cycle may be losing its grip as your choices begin to change. What once felt repetitive can start to look different when you stop responding from the same emotional position. A turning point does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes you recognize it only afterward, when you realize that something you once tolerated no longer feels like the only option. The star adds another layer to this movement, pointing toward the quiet restoration of trust in yourself. After periods when you have questioned your choices, measured yourself through other people's reactions, or wondered whether staying patient would eventually make everything easier, you may begin to reconnect with a steadier sense of hope. This is not about pretending that every uncertainty has disappeared. It is about remembering that you can move forward without having every answer, especially when the direction you choose feels more honest than the one you were maintaining simply to keep the peace. On August 16, 2026, you may find yourself seeing certain people and situations with a clarity that feels quieter but much more honest than before. It may become easier to notice where you've been interpreting someone's potential instead of accepting their behavior as it is, or where you have been preserving an image of harmony while something inside you remained unsettled. The star speaks beautifully to this moment because its light is not about becoming someone new. It is about recovering your ability to see yourself clearly after spending so much time looking through other people's eyes. As you continue the inner work you have already begun, your confidence can become less dependent on approval and more rooted in the simple knowledge that your feelings, values, and choices deserve a place in the room. The star also reminds you that healing does not always arrive as a dramatic breakthrough. Sometimes it looks like no longer questioning yourself every time someone disagrees with you, or realizing that you can care deeply without taking responsibility for another person's entire emotional world. Your growth may already be visible to the people around you through the way you communicate, the standards you maintain, and the calm that comes from making choices with greater self-respect. What once felt like a distant hope can begin to feel more believable because you are no longer waiting for someone else to confirm that you are worthy of it. Let gratitude accompany that progress, not as a demand to forget what hurt you, but as a way of recognizing how much has changed in the way you now meet your own life. The Six of Wands brings another layer to this story: recognition. You may be moving through circumstances where your effort, professionalism, or persistence becomes easier for others to notice, particularly after a period when you felt that your contribution was being overlooked. This could relate to work, finances, a project, or simply a growing sense that people are beginning to understand what you bring to a situation. For Libra, however, the deeper lesson is not to measure your worth entirely through external praise. It is to allow recognition to affirm something you have already learned about yourself. You do not have to become louder than everyone else to deserve visibility, and you do not have to diminish your accomplishments simply because someone else may feel uncomfortable with them. There may be moments when competition becomes more obvious, especially in professional or social environments where several people are trying to establish their value. Rather than treating every other person as a rival, notice where healthy comparison can sharpen your standards and where it simply pulls you away from your own direction. Your ability to cooperate is an asset, but cooperation does not mean making yourself invisible. The Six of Wands asks you to step forward when your work deserves to be seen, while remembering that genuine confidence does not require constant applause. Then comes the Seven of Wands, and its message is particularly important for you. This card asks you to protect the ground you have gained, especially when outside opinions, unreliable inferences, or subtle pressure begin testing your boundaries. You may be tempted to explain yourself repeatedly because you want people to understand your intentions, but not every decision requires a defense, and not every disagreement needs to become a negotiation. Sometimes the most balanced response is simply to know where you stand and remain there, without becoming harsh, reactive, or unnecessarily distant. This can be especially meaningful in relationships. Someone may question your availability, misunderstand your intentions, or become uneasy when you stop responding in the familiar way they have come to expect. You may also notice that certain people were comfortable with your flexibility, but less comfortable with your boundaries. The Seven of Wands does not ask you to close your heart. It asks you to stop confusing openness with unlimited access. When you can remain kind without abandoning your position, you create a healthier kind of balance, one where both people are allowed to exist fully. The Ace of Coins then brings this inner shift down into something tangible. What you have been learning about self-respect may begin influencing practical choices involving work, money, responsibilities, or opportunities that require a clear decision. Rather than imagining that an opportunity simply appears because the universe has chosen you, consider how your recent growth may have made you more prepared to recognize an opportunity and respond to it wisely. A new project, a stronger professional position, an additional source of income, or a practical opening may become meaningful because it gives form to something you have already been building within yourself. The same principle applies to your well-being. When you spend too much time managing expectations, anticipating reactions, or trying to keep every situation emotionally balanced, your body can sometimes carry the strain before your mind fully acknowledges it. Pay attention to persistent stress, anxiety, racing thoughts, unusual physical sensations, or anything that concerns you, and do not try to interpret every symptom through an astrological lens. If something feels persistent or serious, speaking with a qualified healthcare professional is the grounded choice, because reassurance based on real information can be far more helpful than allowing fear to fill in the blanks. Your professional life also appears to be entering a meaningful period of reassessment. You may have reached a point where the old way of working no longer feels sustainable, and a change in responsibilities, leadership, collaboration, or expectations could encourage you to reconsider where your talents are best used. This does not necessarily mean that everything around you changes at once. Sometimes the important shift is simply recognizing that you have outgrown the role you once accepted without questioning. The more clearly you understand your value, the easier it becomes to participate in professional relationships without constantly proving that you deserve your place. Competition may still exist, and there may be people around you who are equally determined to advance, receive recognition, or establish influence. That does not have to intimidate you, especially when you stop measuring your progress against every person moving beside you. Notice the smaller forms of acknowledgement. A responsibility entrusted to you, a project that reflects your strengths, a colleague who seeks your judgment, or a result that confirms your consistency. Even if your leadership is not openly expressive, those details can reveal that your contribution is making an impression. If you are searching for work, the message becomes even more nuanced. Financial improvement matters, and there is nothing wrong with wanting greater security, but this period can also invite you to consider whether a position respects your abilities and gives you room to contribute meaningfully. You may be drawn toward projects where collaboration, creativity, communication, and thoughtful judgment are valued rather than treated as secondary qualities. The right opportunity does not have to be perfect, but it should allow you to feel that your effort is connected to something you genuinely respect. Financially, this is less about sudden abundance and more about becoming discerning with what you already have and what you are preparing to build. You may begin noticing that some financial choices are connected to emotional choices. What you spend to maintain an image, what you continue paying for out of habit, or what you accept because you're afraid that saying no will disappoint someone. As your sense of self-worth becomes steadier, your relationship with resources can become more intentional. You can ask not only, "Can I afford this?" but also, "Does this support the life and values I am actually choosing?" Practical progress is favored when you stay engaged rather than waiting for circumstances to make the decision for you. A small application, conversation, negotiation, budget adjustment, or carefully considered project can create more momentum than a grand plan that never leaves your thoughts. At the same time, resist impulsive financial risks or the urge to tell everyone what you are preparing behind the scenes. Not every person needs access to your plans, especially when you are still deciding what deserves your time, money, and emotional investment. Your intuition can be useful here, but for Libra, intuition works best when it is allowed to speak alongside discernment, rather than replacing it. You are capable of sensing when something feels harmonious, yet you are also learning that something can feel familiar and still be unhealthy or appear peaceful while quietly costing you too much. Pay attention to the difference between an opportunity that genuinely aligns with your values and one that simply looks attractive because it promises to keep everyone satisfied. The clearer that distinction becomes, the easier it is to recognize what deserves a yes, what deserves a boundary, and what may simply be a distraction from the life you are gradually choosing for yourself. Let gratitude stay close to you through this process, but let it be grounded. Gratitude, the kind that notices a calmer reaction, a firmer boundary, a fairer agreement, a better financial decision, or the growing ability to trust yourself without needing every person around you to agree. You are not being asked to control every outcome or create perfect harmony in every corner of your life. You are learning something more lasting, how to participate in your relationships, work, and future without continually stepping away from yourself to keep everything else balanced. The support you need may become easier to recognize as you place more trust in your own judgment. Instead of waiting for circumstances to prove that you are on the right path, you may begin noticing how much changes when your decisions come from self-respect rather than fear of disappointing someone else. For you, abundance is not simply about receiving more. It can also mean having more room to breathe, more honesty in your relationships, and more confidence about where your energy belongs. And when it comes to love, something inside you may be asking to be acknowledged rather than postponed any longer. You may have been so occupied with responsibilities, work, family concerns, and keeping different parts of your life moving smoothly that there has been surprisingly little space to ask yourself what you actually feel. Yet beneath all that activity, your heart has its own language, and it may be becoming harder to ignore. August 16, 2026 can serve as a reflective point for Libra to look honestly at that emotional landscape and ask whether the peace you have been protecting is the same as the peace you truly experience. Emotional honesty does not require drama. Sometimes it begins with one quiet sentence that you have been afraid to say. If you are in a relationship, you may need to be the one who opens that conversation. Not because everything depends on you and not because you are responsible for repairing every difficult moment, but because waiting for another person to somehow understand what has never been expressed can keep both of you standing in the same place. Say what you need with kindness and listen just as carefully to what comes back. When both people are willing to be honest, you may discover that there is far more strength and tenderness in the relationship than you realized, while also gaining clarity about the places where something genuinely needs to change. The greater risk is not necessarily conflict, it is prolonged silence. You may know that something needs to be discussed, yet hesitate because you can already imagine how the other person might react, what they might feel, or how the conversation could disturb the balance between you. But a relationship cannot remain healthy simply because difficult subjects are kept outside the room. Real harmony has enough room for uncomfortable truths, different needs, disappointment, reassurance, and the possibility of finding a better understanding together. If you are single, this same shift can change the way you approach connection. Your social world may offer more opportunities to meet people through friends, gatherings, shared interests, professional environments, or new collaborations. But the deeper change is happening in what you are willing to recognize as meaningful attraction. You may become less interested in chemistry that leaves you uncertain, and more drawn towards someone whose presence feels reciprocal, respectful, and emotionally steady. Rather than rushing to decide where something is going, allow yourself to observe how a person communicates, how they respond to your boundaries, and whether their interest actually meets you halfway. You may also notice that the person who catches your attention does not necessarily arrive in some dramatic setting. A conversation during the work project, a new team, a casual gathering, or an unexpected introduction could simply create a moment of curiosity. What matters is not forcing that moment into a prediction, but allowing yourself to remain open enough to notice what feels different. You have a great deal of affection to offer, Libra, and part of your growth is learning that giving love generously does not mean accepting uncertainty, inconsistency, or emotional imbalance in return. Family brings another layer to this process. Your loved ones may notice changes in you before you have fully put them into words, particularly in the way you communicate, make decisions, or respond to old patterns. Some familiar family dynamics may surface around independence, expectations, or the role you have traditionally played when tensions arise. You may be used to softening conversations, translating one person's feelings for another, or becoming the reasonable middle ground whenever everyone else disagrees. But you do not have to remain the quiet space where everyone else meets. This does not mean withdrawing from the people you love. In fact, clearer boundaries can make closeness more sustainable because you are no longer participating from exhaustion or obligation. A simple conversation, a shared meal, a small family activity, or an honest exchange can strengthen connection without requiring you to solve every underlying problem. Your ability to bring perspective and warmth can be valuable, but it becomes even more powerful when it comes from choice rather than from feeling responsible for everyone's emotional comfort. Your energy also appears better suited to deliberate action than to scattering yourself across every issue that asks for attention. You may have enough steadiness to approach important decisions with greater confidence, especially when you stop spending so much energy on matters that are secondary or outside your control. The professional and financial areas of your life benefit from the same principle. Build on what is solid, organize what has become messy, and make practical choices that support the future you actually want. Less improvisation does not mean less freedom. Sometimes structure creates the space where freedom can finally breathe. There is also a gentle warning here about postponement. You may be tempted to wait for the perfect moment, the perfect wording, or a clearer signal from someone else before making a decision that you already understand on some level. But uncertainty does not always disappear through more waiting. Sometimes clarity arrives because you take one honest step and allow the response to teach you something. Your willingness to speak, ask, negotiate, or establish a boundary can move a situation that has felt strangely suspended. Communication can become one of your strongest tools in this phase. If you need to ask for something, request clarification, negotiate a responsibility, or explain what you need from another person, do it directly and without over-explaining yourself. You can remain gracious while still being firm. The goal is not to win every conversation. It is to make sure your actual position is present in the conversation instead of being quietly replaced by whatever you think everyone else would prefer. Be careful too about delaying decisions simply because you are hoping circumstances will decide for you. When you already know that something needs attention, postponing it can create a low, persistent tension that follows you from one part of life into another. Face what is in front of you with as much calm honesty as you can. You do not need to know every consequence before making a responsible choice, and you do not need everyone's approval before acknowledging what feels true for you. For students, this is an especially useful moment for reconsidering direction rather than studying purely from habit or obligation. Ask yourself which subjects genuinely hold your attention, which areas make you curious enough to keep asking questions, and which skills could become meaningful parts of your future. Your strongest progress may come from understanding why you are learning something, not simply from forcing yourself through another assignment. When interest and discipline begin working together, even areas where you previously struggled can become easier to approach with patience. Do not settle for doing only what is required when you sense there is more you could understand. Explore the subject more deeply, ask thoughtful questions, test what you have learned, and remain open to discovering that your interests are changing. Progress does not always arrive as a dramatic achievement. Sometimes it is the moment you realize that something which once felt difficult now makes sense because you stayed with it. That growing confidence can become its own motivation as you continue shaping the direction ahead. And when it comes to compatibility, Taurus may bring an especially grounding influence into your world. Their steady nature can encourage you to slow down and notice what remains valuable once the noise around a decision begins to settle. For you, Libra, this connection can offer a useful reminder that not every choice has to be made through endless comparison, and that sometimes stability comes from giving something worthwhile enough time to reveal its value. Taurus may also help you appreciate the quiet strength of consistency, showing you that a meaningful path does not always need to feel exciting or completely clear from the beginning. With Gemini, the connection can feel mentally refreshing and naturally engaging. Conversation may become one of the strongest points between you, giving both of you room to exchange ideas, question assumptions, and look at familiar situations from a completely different angle. Gemini can encourage you to loosen your tendency to weigh every possible outcome, while your Libra perspective can help bring greater balance when too many possibilities begin competing for attention. Together, you may discover that talking things through is not simply about finding the perfect answer. Sometimes it is about understanding what you truly value before deciding where your energy belongs. This dynamic can also teach you an important distinction between considering a choice and actually making one. You may both enjoy discussing possibilities, imagining different futures, or exploring what might happen if you took another direction. But eventually your thoughts need to become visible through your actions. Gemini can bring spontaneity and fresh ideas into your world, while you can help give those ideas more structure and consideration. When you respect one another's differences, the connection can create a healthy rhythm between curiosity and intention, allowing you to remain open-minded without becoming permanently caught between possibilities. Then there is Leo, whose energy may encourage a very different side of you to emerge. Leo can be expressive, warm, and comfortable taking up space, and that confidence may remind you that considering everyone else's needs does not mean your own desires should always come second. Their presence can encourage you to speak more openly about what you want, whether that involves love, creativity, work, or simply allowing yourself to be recognized for what you bring into a situation. In return, your natural awareness of different perspectives can soften Leo's intensity with diplomacy and consideration. creating a connection where confidence and cooperation can strengthen one another. Through these connections, you may also notice that support does not always arrive in the form of someone solving a problem for you. Sometimes it comes through a friend who listens without judgment, a partner who gives you room to be honest, a colleague who recognizes your contribution, or a family member who reminds you that you do not have to keep everything balanced by yourself. The important part is becoming more willing to receive that support without immediately worrying about whether accepting it will create an obligation. You can remain independent while allowing others to stand beside you, and genuine connection does not require you to give up the sense of self you have worked so hard to maintain. As you reflect on these compatibility themes, remember that astrology is best used as a perspective rather than a fixed script for your relationships. Keep the ideas that help you understand your patterns more clearly, recognize what you need from the people around you, or approach a connection with greater honesty and awareness. If something does not match your experience, there is no reason to force it into place. Your lived reality, your judgment, and the choices you make will always carry more weight than any symbolic interpretation. What matters is whether a connection gives you room to remain yourself while also encouraging you to grow. And if this reading gave you something meaningful to reflect on, you are welcome to support the channel with a like. That small gesture helps these reflections reach other people who may also be looking for a thoughtful moment of perspective. And if you would like to remain part of this community, you can subscribe and turn on notifications for future readings. Most of all, carry forward whatever helps you return to your own voice with greater clarity, because the balance you are seeking is not simply about keeping every relationship peaceful. It is about building connections where consideration, honesty, and your own needs can exist together.